In a small rural town in Arkansas, a boy named Charles Jackson French was born in the autumn of 1919. He would later earn nicknames like the Hero of the Solomons and the Human Tugboat, after a single act of valor etched his name into Second World War history. French's early life was marked by hardship. After losing both parents, he went to live with his older sister Viola in Omaha, Nebraska. It was there, as a young African American growing up in a segregated society, that he learned resilience and learned to swim in the muddy Red River by age 8. In 1937, at just 18 years of age, he enlisted in the US Navy. Like all black sailors of that era, French was confined to the steward or messman branch, the only roles then open to African Americans, serving meals and swabbing decks in a segregated navy. He completed a 4-year tour and returned to civilian life in 1941, but only weeks after his discharge, history intervened. Pearl Harbor was attacked, and French, driven by duty, rushed back to the Navy. On the 19th of December 1941, he re-enlisted to serve his country in its hour of need. By the late summer of 1942, Charles Jackson French found himself half a world away in the South Pacific, amid one of World War II's fiercest battlegrounds. He was assigned as a mess attendant aboard USS Gregory, a former destroyer converted to a transport ship during the Guadalcanal campaign. The Navy was still segregated, and French, like other black crewmen, served in the ship's kitchen, yet fate was about to push him far beyond his humble duties. On the night of the 5th of September 1942, the Gregory and sister ship were patrolling near Guadalcanal when they stumbled into a group of Japanese warships under cover of darkness. Suddenly, Japanese guns opened fire, their flashes ripping through the tropical night. Illumination flares dropped from above silhouetted the American ships, turning them into easy targets. The Gregory, lightly armed and outgunned, took a deadly barrage. In a matter of minutes, the ship was mortally hit, her boilers exploded, and the order was given to abandon ship. Amid the ensuing chaos, French emerged from the smoke and flames as one of the few uninjured crew members. Though only 5'8" in height, he was powerfully built and a strong swimmer, qualities that would soon prove life-saving. As the USS Gregory slipped beneath the waves, French sprang into action. He swam through burning debris and oil-slick waters, gathering wounded shipmates who were struggling to stay afloat. He managed to load 15 injured sailors onto a makeshift life raft in the darkness. But even as he did so, new dangers closed in. The current and wind were pushing the drifting raft toward a nearby island occupied by Japanese troops. French knew that if they washed ashore as castaways, capture by the enemy was almost certain, and with it, likely execution. To make matters worse, the waters around them were shark-infested, with fins slicing through the moonlit waves. Ensign Robert Adrian, one of the survivors on the raft, later recalled how he came to and found French beside them in the water. Adrian, himself badly wounded and half-blinded by shrapnel, tried to persuade French to climb into the raft, out of the reach of circling sharks. But French refused. He was, he said, less afraid of the sharks than he was of the Japanese. In that moment, Charles Jackson French, a black mess attendant who wasn't even trained for combat, made a fateful decision. Stripping off his clothes and tying a rope from the raft around his waist, he told the men, "Just keep telling me if I'm going the right way," before slipping into the dark water. What followed was an almost superhuman feat of endurance and courage. Through the blackness of the Pacific night, French began swimming, towing the raft full of injured men behind him. Hour after hour he swam, tugging his comrades away from the enemy-held shore and into open water. The sea was churning and alive with unseen perils. At one point, a shark's rough skin brushed against French's legs, sending a jolt of fear through him. Yet he never let go of the rope. He later recounted that he kept telling himself to just keep paddling, determined to put as much distance as possible between the raft and the hostile shore. The only sounds were the splash of French's strokes, the groans of the wounded, and occasional gunfire in the distance. At times, the current was so strong that progress was agonizingly slow, but French pressed on relentlessly. He swam through the night for 6 to 8 hours, towing the raft mile after mile out of danger. Those on board could scarcely believe his stamina. Ensign Adrian periodically called out in the dark, guiding French's direction per his request. It was an act of pure willpower and selflessness, a lone swimmer, exhausted and in peril, refusing to save himself so that others might live. Finally, as dawn broke, salvation arrived. In the first light of day, a US scout plane spotted the tiny raft adrift in the vast ocean. Soon after, a marine landing craft was dispatched and raced to pluck the survivors from the sea. Thanks to French's all-night heroics, 15 American lives were brought to safety that morning. French himself, utterly spent, had to be helped aboard. But even in rescue, the realities of segregation surfaced. Crewmen of the American rescuing vessel initially directed French to sit apart in the coloured section below decks, standard practice in the segregated military. This time, however, his shipmates refused. The very men French had saved rose to his defence, insisting that he remain by their side on deck. In that moment, bobbing on the waves after a night of terror, the usual colour line on a Navy ship was erased by common humanity. The grateful sailors would not let prejudice tarnish the camaraderie born out of French's sacrifice. It was a small glimpse of the unity that French's act of courage had inspired. News of the Gregory sinking and the mess attendants' daring rescue began to spread, first as a rumour and then as an inspiring war story. At first, Ensign Adrian didn't even know the full name of the sailor who saved him, he only knew him as French. Indeed, early press reports spoke of a, quote, powerful Negro mess attendant who had swum through shark-filled waters towing a raft of wounded shipmates. The story captured the public's imagination, and on October the 21st in 1942, Ensign Adrian himself appeared in an NBC radio dramatization, It Happened in the Service, to recount the incredible rescue for a nationwide audience. Listeners were riveted by the tale of courage under fire. Soon the name Charles Jackson French was revealed, and he became a symbol of selfless heroism. The black press in particular seized on the story. One editorial in the Pittsburgh Courier hailed, quote, a black boy from Arkansas who risked his life that his white comrades might live, pointedly noting that the Navy itself hadn't publicized this act. It was learned almost incidentally through Adrian's testimony. The Courier stressed the bitter irony that mess attendants, black or Filipino sailors barred from other Navy roles, had not much opportunity for heroism in a ship's galley, yet here was one who had made a heroic job out of it. Charles French's deed was forcing Americans to reconsider their prejudices. He had been looked down upon as a mere messman of frozen status, the paper wrote, but after that night he was suddenly looked up to as a saviour. Back home, French received moments of celebrity and acclaim, especially in his adopted hometown of Omaha. In October 1942, he visited Omaha on leave and was greeted as a hero. He rode in motorcades and was honoured by city officials and community leaders of all races. At Creighton University football game half-time, French walked onto the field with his sister Viola and received a 5-minute standing ovation from 30,000 grateful spectators. Newspapers dubbed him the Human Tugboat, and his photograph appeared in publications across the country. He was celebrated at war bond rallies and even featured in a syndicated comic strip illustrating his midnight swim. The Chicago Defender, a leading black newspaper, named Charles Jackson French its Hero of the Year for 1942. Meanwhile, a Philadelphia gum company included him as the only African American in a series of patriotic war gum trading cards. Card number 129, titled Negro Swimmer Tows Survivors, depicted French in the water pulling the raft as shark fins loomed nearby. His story resonated far and wide as an exemplar of bravery and sacrifice. There was even talk in Hollywood of a film about his life, a suggestion as part of the growing recognition of black contributions to the war effort. Yet amid all the public praise, the official military honours for French's heroism lagged behind. Those who knew what he had done felt he deserved one of the Navy's highest awards. In fact, the Gregory's surviving officers initially recommended French for the Navy Cross, the same medal that had been awarded to Dory Miller, another black messman turned hero at Pearl Harbor. But in French's case, the Navy's top brass demurred. Whether due to the unwritten rules of military hierarchy, some argued no enlisted man should receive a higher honour than the ship's white officers, or simply the prejudice of the era, the Navy Cross recommendation was denied. Instead, in May 1943, Admiral William F. Bull Halsey, commander of the South Pacific Fleet, sent French a letter of commendation praising his meritorious conduct in action, but no higher award came during the war. Charles French remained, officially, a hero with no medal, a fact that spoke volumes about the inequalities of his time. French continued to serve in the Navy through the remainder of the Second World War, but by the war's end, as the headlines moved on to other heroes and victories, French's story gradually faded from the national spotlight. He returned to private life, settling in California, and tried to build an ordinary life out of extraordinary experiences. In later interviews, French spoke little about his heroic swim, often deflecting praise. Tragically, his post-war life was cut short, and by the mid-1950s his health had deteriorated, and on the 7th of November 1956, he died in San Diego at the age of just 37. The cause was liver failure brought on by alcoholism, a fate all too common among combat veterans left to wrestle alone with their memories. He was laid to rest with quiet honours at Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery, largely unknown to the country he had so bravely served. For a time, it seemed that the Human Tugboat and his astonishing exploit would be relegated to a footnote in history. Decades passed. Those 15 sailors who owed their lives to French never forgot him, but the wider nation did. Yet the story of Charles Jackson French refused to vanish completely. It survived in the annals of black history and in the collections of World War II lore. In the early 21st century, as America re-examined the contributions of its unsung heroes, French's name resurfaced with growing admiration. Historians and family members began campaigning to write the historical record. By 2021, momentum was building to properly honour French's legacy. The city of Omaha, where he had once been celebrated, pushed to memorialise him. In May 2022, the US Navy formally posthumously awarded Charles Jackson French the Navy and Marine Corps Medal, the service's highest award for heroism not involving direct combat. At a ceremony in San Diego, Navy officials presented the medal to French's surviving family and dedicated the base's rescue swimmer training pool in his honour. That same year, the US Congress passed a law renaming a post office in Omaha as the Petty Officer First Class Charles Jackson French Post Office, ensuring his name lives on in his hometown. Then in January 2024, the Navy made a historic announcement. A new Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, DDG-142, will be commissioned as the USS Charles J. French. This warship, slated to sail in 2031, will carry French's name around the world, a permanent honour for a man whose bravery once kept a tiny raft of sailors alive against all odds.